Hi, I'm your host Vasco Duarte. Welcome to the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast, where we share tips and tricks from Scrum Masters around the world. Every day, we bring you inspiring answers to important questions that all Scrum Masters face day after day. Hi there, friend. Merry Christmas. We have for you today a special episode where we interview Agilists and Scrum Masters that have influenced us with their work, but are probably not on the top of your speakers list at your local conference. Yves, the co-host for the Tips from the Trenches audiobook, handpicked 5 groundbreaking Agilists that you will not get to hear anywhere else, but here on the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast, you will hear from them and learn from their experience. I hope you enjoy this Christmas special that we bring to you in this 2020 special Christmas. I hope you enjoyed the show and Merry Christmas! Hi everybody, welcome to our special Christmas 2020 episode, the last of this week. This time we have with us, all the way from, I believe it's Sofia in Bulgaria, Ivana Gancheva. Welcome, Ivana.
Thank you, Vasco. Welcome. Very nice to be here.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to have you here. And of course, we also have with us our co-host for the Tips from the Trenches audiobook, Yves Hanoulle. Welcome, Yves.
Wow, well, be nice again, Vasco, to be here. And for the last session, I really look forward to this.
Absolutely. And you can find out more about the Tips from the Trenches audiobook at bit.ly/audiotips2. That's all lowercase, one word, audio tips 2 with the numeral 2 at the end. So, Yves, why don't you introduce our guest, Ivana, to us?
Yes, well, from everyone in this list, Ivana is the only person I really met in person, actually multiple times. And it was really in one of these famous bar conversations at XP 2010 in Norway. There were actually a lot of famous and non-famous Agile people around the table. And from all these serious and not so serious conversations, Ivana really impressed me most. Actually, she wasn't trying to impress anyone. She was just curiously asking questions, really trying to understand everyone. And ever since we kept in touch, mostly virtual, I think we've seen each other at least at one, maybe multiple ALE events over the years. And yeah, way too long ago that we've actually physically saw each other and even were in a podcast. So it was really nice for me to say, okay, let's have Ivana here and let's talk some more.
Absolutely. So, Ivana, the first question we ask is always how you got started. So, how did you get started? What was that trigger moment that told you that Agile was the way to go?
I started as a developer with the desire to actually go into leadership. This was my plan, to be a leader for people. At that time, it appeared more as some form of a management role for a business or product development. And it was important for me to work as a developer so that I, actually learn a lot more in practice, and B, if I work with people like that I truly understand what it's like to be in their feet and how do things look from that perspective. And in the first team that I joined as a developer, very quickly on, it wasn't me, someone came up with the idea of let's do Scrum. I had no clue what that was. But the more I found out, the more I saw how in our team that made really, really things more visible, more clear. We were doing far more valuable stuff. This really attracted me. So I joined in on a meetup, XP and Agile in Trondheim, Norway. Started connecting with people from the community. The conference that Yves mentioned was really a big kicker in connecting with super experienced people that I've learned so much from later on in life, and kind of really pushed me into even higher activity, including like with some friends, we started the Agile Lean Europe conference, the first one in Berlin in 2011. So basically, I think one of the good things, or what really kicked this off for me, was that there were so many people that you could connect to, and other seekers, if I can put it that way. So, I think generally the mindset is quite intuitive for a lot of people seeking improvement. So it just felt like, okay, this makes so much sense to
So
me
you
right off
found
the.
your community in some way.
Yes, yes, and I probably should mention that there's a bit of a difficulty with the whole label of it, right? Of just saying agile, and then we kind of have a box in a sense, and I think it goes far beyond that. The general understanding of how do we work better together. So many times it would go outside of the agile label, but it's this community and how should I say that, intent in business and the world to discover how to do things better together.
Wow, that's a really nice definition of agile in a sense. Trying to, yeah, because I agree there. What I've seen a lot of agile is taking best practices or good ideas from basically everywhere, trying to make it a better world for everyone, including the people who are delivering this and that kind of thing. So that's definitely something that's recognizable. So if you had to pick out one personal lesson from your agile journey that you started then to share to our listeners, what would that lesson be?
I find it extremely difficult, and probably everybody who asks this question is struggling to say what's the one lesson. It's crazy because it's every time every day you discover something new. But I think if not a lesson, then rather identifying a prime directive in a sense for what I personally choose to do. So I usually focus more on the organization, the whole organization, the leadership, the organizational culture. These things for me are the keys for long-term improvement, right? And yes, I could work with a team on very basic practices and things, but the bigger picture is what I believe is really ensuring that there's a long-term success. And I don't know if it's a lesson, but rather through time identifying that my prime directive is helping the organization instill continuous improvement mindset. It doesn't matter how they call it. It doesn't matter even what the exact speed that they're going to achieve it. But if there's one thing to always try to focus on is, are they learning how to learn and improve? Are we learning? Yeah, I've been quite lucky that in my experience, there's also cases in which I've been an internal, like internally in the company as an employee. So it's that's an interesting story as well of how they are different roles, basically, if you're external coach, consultant, or an internal one. But I think that not a lesson, but rather a guide is to always keep that in mind, that if there's one thing you're there for me, for example, it's is the company learning how to learn, how to discover things and learn from them.
You said the bigger picture, and you used words like the organization, the leadership, the culture, and pardon my perhaps a little bit pickiness, but I think those words are too generic for most people. Now, for you, obviously, they're not anymore because you've had that progress of, understanding and kind of classifying, structuring how you look at organizations, leadership, and culture. But many of us are still in that journey, still struggling to figure what that means. So take a moment and explain to us a little bit more of what you mean when you use words, the bigger picture, organization, leadership, culture. What do you mean? And especially for Scrum Masters and Agile coaches out there, from that perspective, what do you mean by those words?
I totally understand, and I think it's a very, very valid question. It is probably important to underline that I will always find myself in the role of a student. Like I myself am continually discovering that. For example, for me, when I look at an organization, and it's probably been very helpful that my first attempts were in smaller organizations, so it's easier to kind of scale up from there. Of course, the level of complexity grows the bigger the organization is, so it becomes more difficult. But for me, for example, it's mapping out what are the key aspects of the business that is externally towards, especially if it's a B2B business. What are those relationships? What do they look like? What are the internal influences of development and growth? Does the organization have an idea of how it wants to look like in the future? Are we striving for a better state or better vision, and how does that look like? For example, an interesting moment is also the different, for me, for example, mapping out what are the things that are historically super strong habits that are absolutely, parts of the system, and what are the things that are new influences. Whether you have a business transformation, like we've bought a new business, or, so identifying the different types of influencers of the system. On the word influence, for example, having a map, like in some cases, I actually drove for myself a map of actually who are the real influencers in the system. And that not rarely, but sometimes they're not the same as the people with the title. Sometimes you would have an organization which there's this older person who's been there for a long time. They don't really have a high title, but everyone would listen to everything they say, right? So I guess it's when I say the bigger picture organization, it's mapping out aspects of the current context and an idea of where, and by context, I really mean the different elements of the business, people, processes, relationships with businesses, internal ones, then intention of where we want to go and where these intentions are influenced from. And in a sense, okay, what are the levers, or what are the things that actually influencing this? So if that gives an idea of how I perceive that, of yeah. For the culture, I guess they're more related to what are the habits, what are the ways of thinking that are absolutely instilled. Because I think what's key to our work is not to say, here's the way to do it and now we're going to do it this way, but also figuring out how to assist the step. And like I personally like for people to have an awareness of how they're doing things today as well, because that helps them out further down the road, see the difference and appreciate what is worth investing in and what maybe not so much. It's like some things, yeah, it could be better, but it's not going to be that valuable for our future development compared to other things we could focus on.
So it looks also, you said earlier on that you started as a developer and you saw yourself already much farther into leadership. Listening to all this, you're already there, I would say. I assume you're no longer a developer, or like you say, you're a learner from these things. Could you say a little more about the steps you took? Because I can imagine that some people might also feel like, I want to go into that direction, because it looked like you had a very clear plan. Well, maybe the plan shifted a little bit, but you had some ideas. Could you say something about that?
I don't know how serious that would sound, but I have been extremely blessed with meeting people that have helped me along the way. So I feel that it's, yes, some of it was my intention, but also, for example, even the first conference I went to speak at, it was a friend, Olaf Levitz, who said, let's speak there. Okay, I've applied, we're speaking. So it was, and in the same way, going to companies and working on a level where you have access to leadership, it's been through collaboration with coaches that have already done some of the work for the leadership and management to have appreciation for this kind of effort. So in all honesty, I would have to say that in some cases I have put the effort of fighting for that, for ensuring that I work with as higher management as possible in order to really support in the bigger picture. But in some cases it has been with opportunities thanks to people from the community.
You surround yourself with these people, it looks like, or you at least I don't know, move around in these environments where these people recognize, hey, Ivana, that would be a right person to go with me on this journey, I assume.
I assume that's what happened. Yeah, it's and it's probably something related to what you mentioned about the curiosity and the just wanting to learn. I think that's one of the important things about our roles, and I guess I hinted at that already. But it's like a constant learning about all these areas. And when you, for example, today we work with developers, tomorrow I work with recruiters, and I need to figure out what are the pillars of their roles, what are the pillars of their work, in order to be able to support them in their mindset shift towards how they organize their work, right? So yeah, I think it's a lot to do with discovering people, in a sense. And in some cases, yeah, I have myself, figured out a way how to explain and work directly with leadership. And I think I think we just need to be bold. We need to be a bit more courageous and just if you strongly believe that this is what's going to make this effort worth it, to try to fight for it. And I can't say that it's always comfortable to go outside of your comfort zone, but I think it really helps. So if that is a perspective to look at for people who are now wondering, just be brave, throw yourself, learn like crazy, but just take the extra step.
And don't be afraid of failure, because failure is part of the journey.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Find a friend that you can talk to and talk about all the disappointments and frustrations, because that's also part of the journey. So Ivana, from this perspective that you shared with us so far, I would like to know from Agile, Kanban, Scrum, XP, Lean, whatever, what's important for you from these aspects that you are aware of in Agile and Lean. What is the one aspect that you wish all of the teams, maybe even leadership teams that you work with, would understand and apply?
Risking to sound a bit like repetitive, I think it's the trick of improvement. Like the trick of, for example, I've seen a lot of cases in which, we understand, the prototype, the lean startup, the experiment, the plan, do, check, act approach. And yes, we experiment, but we don't learn from the experiments. So if it's a question about a more global aspect, or like a thin red line throughout the whole thing, is learning how to break things into more concrete things, define an experiment, define the learning. What did you learn from it? I think if we only get that across, if people only do that, they will discover a more flexible way to work and have agility, both in relationships, business plans, product development, and so on. So if there's one thing, I think that's the one I would bet my passion on.
Yeah, so it's learning, and I'm also hearing the typical double loop learning. So learning on the learning aspects and things
exactly,
like
what did we learn from that to use in the next experiment, and so on and so on, and in the aspect that currently would bring us most value.
And so you talked also a little bit about, Vasco asked about the leadership teams. What are the struggles that you see there? Are there things that you help with these struggles? Do you have any tips there?
I find it quite challenging to speak so generally about, where we know when we work with people, contexts are so unique and specific. I think one thing that helps there a lot is for me, it's been key for people to walk a bit the acceptance path. And that is of accepting where we are. I don't think you should spend too much time on now. Like you should focus on where you go, right? But just being okay when we realize what is probably not so optimal in our leadership group, to accept it and then to walk towards a change. Because I've seen sometimes in which we want to achieve something, but there's people that are holding on to our weaknesses or struggles, and they will put them off over and over and over on the table. So I guess that is probably one thing that I would.
As in a shame? In the beginning, I thought shame, but then you say they keep on to it. Why do they keep on to it?
Well, for example, and that's why I'm struggling a bit, because it's a very generalized discussion and question. But let's say you have a leadership group that's responsible for something that has struggled with some habits in the group, whatever that is, like terribly inefficient meetings, or understanding the differences in our roles and the things we're responsible for, or it could be anything. And we intuitively know that we have systematic issues in how we collaborate, or how we even could be our skill or knowledge about business development, anything. And we know that it's there, and on the journey of improvement, you kind of have to accept that weakness and let go of putting it on the table. And sometimes you would have spaces where people have struggled so long with it that it's important for them to always remind the rest of the group of how bad we are about that, and kind of holding on to that past, rather than, okay, we I don't know if that's okay to say, but we suck at this. We're bad at this, right? We struggle with this, and we accept that. Now let's see what we can do about it, right? So I think that's the one common thing that I have found that is repetitive, and you really need to help people. And it's usually one or two people in the group. It's not everyone, but it's enough to kind of. It's almost like you're sailing and your anchor is down, right? It's like someone's holding the group a bit with a. But let's be real, we're bad at something. Okay.
For agile coaches and scrum masters, definitely one of the things that this brings to my mind is that we need to make a conscious decision on whether we are striving to find solutions or striving to identify problems. And when it comes to people, usually the best is to focus on solutions. I think you gave a few examples of how that would look like if somebody is always coming in with the problems. When it comes to technology and to mechanics and to process design, it's probably better to start from looking at the problem and understanding it well. For me, one of the perhaps defining moments in making this distinction was learning about solution-focused coaching. I think is a great area of research for us Scrum Masters and Agile coaches, because there is a big difference. There is I would say even a mind shift necessary when working with people versus working with technology.
Absolutely, yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I was I tried to touch on that a bit. Then I think it is extremely important that you're very aware of the choice you're making. And I think, for example, for me, I think I've become better at what I do, being flexible in having both approaches, like choosing which approach to take, because sometimes solution focus requires either maturity or braveness, which might not be there. So you might really struggle. So sometimes, depending on what it is you're focused on, whether it's how work is organized or how collaboration is organized, I think it's important for us to make a very aware choice of what is the approach we're taking with this group or organization. Are we going to talk about now? Are we going to only focus about future? Like what is the tactic in a sense that we're choosing?
Yeah, it also reminded me of the another book technique in crucial conversations, where you say you keep talking about the first thing, you're late, but no, at a certain point it's not about being late. It's about you don't keep the promise that you want to be on time now. So it's a different conversation, different problem, and so what you're saying is we keep referring to the old thing, we're not good at it, instead of okay, but we took some actions to make them better. We don't keep the promises there, or something else. And so, yeah, we're talking about the different conversations. So that brings that, in that sense, I brought up a book, and actually that brings me back to the next question: is there one book that you go back to thinking about continuously development in agile practice? Is there one thing that you say that helped me really much? I really reread it, or I advise it to a lot of people. Is there a book like that, or a resource? Could be a podcast as well, huh?
Yeah, I always struggle with that question, because it kind of feels like there's this one thing, yeah. And I even thought about asking you back to the two of you that question, because I feel it's a bit difficult. But there are multiple, but there's one that I love going. So that I have to admit that there's a few books that I do reread, more than a few probably, and sometimes I find it more valuable for me than reading a new one, but I try to balance both. But one that I really like, it's The Organizational Culture and Leadership by Edgar Schein, and I probably need to explain why. It's not solely the information that it conveys. I think a lot of our efforts are related to like constant observation, like having your antennas all the time, especially when you're assisting with some change, is like really noticing what is going on, because it's never a straight line, right? There's different effects throughout, like ripple effects throughout the organization and system, and being aware of whether you're aiming for a global thing that will affect the whole system, or is it some local thing, and then how does that ripple through the organization. And what I like in this book is some of the way he talks about some environments, and it's almost like when I think about that book, it's almost like I'm taking these type of glasses, right? So I don't know if it's a good explanation, but it's not necessarily solely the content itself, but rather the perspective that it invokes in me.
It brings you in the mindset for seeing these things. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, it's like there's multiple books that do that, but I don't know, it just this came at the right moment in my life or something, so it triggered that association. It's like a song, like a song that brings
That you like to put on repeat, and
yeah, and sometimes I don't even open to reread it. It's more about thinking about that one through, let's look through these eyes. And
it's a great metaphor, by the way. It's like a song that you play again to remind you of the feeling you had the first time, or the second,
yes,
or the third time you heard it. So, Ivana, we're getting close to the end. The last question we want to ask is one that tries to synthesize your experience, your journey. And the question is, what's the one message that you would like to leave for the wider Agile community?
Oh, guys, all of your questions are so... let's see.
But so far you did really well in finding always that one thing. So...
Okay, let's try with this one. So I'll start from the end, because that's what kind of got to me the most. Yeah, it's like, what's the message? I think the message is for us to continue to be brave and so sharing. So, for example, now in Bulgaria, I moved back to Bulgaria from Norway 3 years ago, and now we have this every month with the Bulgarian Agile community. We're doing this open space technology kind of session where we meet online, and I find it amazing how sometimes a question by someone who has just started on the journey triggers me to read and learn about something which I didn't expect. And I think this is one of the most powerful things about the community, or this tightly, loosely connected group of people, is then we keep on sharing and learning. And I think if there's one thing, is to say, let's continue being brave and bold and discovering new ways, and being okay with the whole terminology and business influence in this global learning, right? Because at the end of the day, there are some influences that come from real life, where there's like a fight over, should we call it agile or should we call it this? Should there be estimates, no estimates? Like every now and again, there's these, and we're going through these. Just in the last 15 years, you can see that there's constantly those fights in a sense. But I find them positive at the end of the day, because they propel a conversation. So we all learn from them, and we almost always realize that it's never black and white. So, so what can we take from both sides? Yeah. But I guess if there's a message, is let's continue being bold and brave, and sharing and learning from each other just as much as we can. It'll be awesome once we start seeing each other physically again, because I think there is a difference. Probably now we end up having access to more content, like you get to see and hear more things as volume. But I think the face-to-face thing could really bring back a lot of the value that we're now probably missing a bit. So yeah, that would be my message. And I got so excited about this that I forgot the first part of your question. But
No, that was the question.
Okay.
That is the question. And thank you for sharing that. I think that's a brilliant message to leave for the Agile community here on the podcast, that tries to do exactly that, like try to get us to continue to actively share what we've learned over the years.
Yeah, I think what you guys are doing is one of those great examples, right? It's like, what can each of us do, this little extra thing that would bring more value to more people, and it always has an effect, I'm sure. So thank you very much for what you guys are doing.
Well, yeah, it really, you said a few times in this interview, or the podcast, that these are hard questions, because we indeed, it's almost in every question, I've just been rereading it. It's what's the one book, one message, one thing that are the hardest things. And of course, we all know that we give you time, you can find 10 of these. But by just forcing people in a nice way to, okay, just give me at this moment your one thing. We get so much value out of that, and we did that now 5 times this week, and we get all these different things. And I'm sure if we would stop recording and would redo it all over again immediately, now we would get different answers that would also be valuable. But that's the point, is not that one best. The point is that it forces you to think about some of these things, and then you to be brave to indeed trying to answer them.
Yep.
I'm
very grateful. I'm very grateful for the. I don't know. I guess there's probably people who feel more comfortable with the one. But
But on the other hand, I mean, we as a community and practitioners, every single day we have to answer this question. When you're in front of a leadership team and you're tackling a specific aspect of the organization or culture or their relationship with the teams, at that moment, you need to decide, what is the one approach I'm going to take right now? Like tomorrow I can take another one and I'll ask the same question again. But we as practitioners, we're asking ourselves these questions every day.
It's true. And I'm truly grateful. I think it's been an awesome exercise for me as well to think about these one things. So I'm very, very glad, and I appreciate it a lot.
So Ivana, we're getting close to the end, but before we do go, share with us, where can we find out more about you and the work that you're doing?
I must say that I'm not very effective in sharing a lot online. I guess you could reach me on LinkedIn, Ivana Gancheva, and just get in touch with me. I'm not very good at blogs or books or things like writing stuff yet. Maybe eventually that'll become. We had a chat with you, Vasco, about that. That's for some people this seems to work pretty well, and others are, I don't know. I really merge myself big time in what I currently do and the context and the thing. So just get in touch with me on LinkedIn, and I can share stuff. I do speak at conferences, not so much the last 1.5, 2 years, but every now and again when I feel this is something I really want to share, I enjoy doing that as well.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for that. We'll put the links on the show notes so that everybody can find your LinkedIn page and get in touch. And Yves and Ivana, thank you very much for your generosity with your time and your knowledge.
Thank you too.
It was a pleasure to do this whole week with you, Vasco. So it was nice to do this. It was nice to get in touch. Actually, you gave me the opportunity to get in touch with people that I wanted to get in touch. Same with getting back in touch with Ivana. So I hope it won't take that long again to see you back, Ivana. So we'll have to meet again somewhere. I'm not sure if we'll have an ALE this year. Probably not, or it would be remote again. I'm not sure. But next year, then definitely we'll have to meet up again.
Sincerely hope it happens sooner rather than later, Yves.
Same for me.
We hope you enjoyed this special episode on continuous delivery. If you did, please share this episode with your colleagues and spread the message about continuous delivery and how it can help your team and your business.